Many successful comedy shows have moved from Radio 4 to BBC television, most recently Dead Ringers in Little Britain. But 20 years ago, a similar cross-media transfer went slightly wrong. A series created by Radio 4 ended up running for 10 years on Channel 4. Whose Line Is It Anyway? The improvisational game show hosted by Clive Anderson, which also regularly featured Paul Merton, Greg Proops and others. 20 years since it started on Channel 4, and a decade after it ended with a set of American editions, Whose Line has been released on DVD for the first time and is currently being re-shown on TV. So, improvising an item rather in the style of Sue McGregor's The Reunion, we brought together Clive Anderson, Josie Lawrence and John Sessions. The latter was celebrated on the show for his literary erudition, so I suggested that he wouldn't be very impressed that the DVDs we'd been sent spelled the first word of the title, Whose, with an apostrophe S. Surely points should be deducted.
I think so. I think we can safely say that is wrong, and it's a sign of the times that we live in. Education, the destruction of the grammar schools, but that's all I'm going to say.
What a tribute to you, though, Mark, because I've been asked about this video by several people over the last few weeks, and nobody's pointed this out. I hadn't noticed it. I hadn't taken it out of the box, I'm afraid. So nobody else has noticed this, so well done. Tribute to Radio 4 and Mark Lawson.
Now, the traditional question that performers are asked when DVD box sets come out from long ago, are you all getting money for this?
Vast amounts. Billions.
I didn't even know it was out.
No.
I thought we were here to talk about the fact that it's been repeated on the Dave channel. I just this second find out that we're here to promote a DVD.
We're supposed to know this sort of stuff, and we don't know. This is
No,
pathetic. This
nobody tells
shows
us
what holds
anything.
this country back.
Clive, I know you were sent the box set, so it gave you the opportunity to sit and watch several hours of yourself, somewhat younger. Did you do it?
No, but my children have discovered, and their friends have discovered that Whose Line Is It Anyway goes out on the channel called Dave, and it goes out rather earlier in the day than it used to go out when it first went out, so sort of daytime, early afternoon, early evening. So younger children now watch it, so I've got a new status with my children's friends. Oh, I didn't know your dad did television.
I was walking down the street the other day and there was some lads on the corner, one of them wearing like his hood up, and I thought, oh, all right, don't make eye contact. And they just turned to me and said, "Whose line, respect?" I thought, oh.
Excellent.
Now, the real reason you're here, Josie and John, is to admit, after all these years and following the Blue Peter scandal and others, that the whole thing was rigged, wasn't it? You always knew what you were going to be asked next.
No. I remember Dan Patterson, our delightful producer, saying, if you could get this in, that would be good.
He did that once with us.
Yeah.
He did The World's Worst would be stuck in a lift or something. I thought, why has he suddenly put his head around the makeup door and said that?
Yeah.
And it didn't work because we thought too much about it. But you're right, it is the question we're asked all the time. And I still improvise at the Comedy Store, so we're constantly being asked.
The whole point of the programme is to do improvisation. There's no point in giving advice. It's like you could do a magic show. You could easily fake a magic show. You could get a bloke to come on with a hat, and then you could stop the filming, and then you'd go and get the rabbit, put it in, put it out. But it's easier just to find Paul Daniels and say, right, go on and do your act, and you film it.
Was it incredibly competitive? Because you are known to be slightly competitive, John, and others, including Stephen Fry, were. Were you watching what the others were doing and thinking, I've got to top that?
It was never a case of green-eyed monsters, but it was a case of, well, everyone else is being jolly good here, I better be good or I'm going to look useless. But it wasn't a case of, I hope he makes a mess up of that line. I'm not like that.
I think there's a misconception as well that impro is competitive. I don't know why, perhaps because of theatre sports or something, but I don't think I'd be able to improvise properly with someone who's being competitive, because the whole point of it for me is they give you something, it's banter.
Did you ever get improviser's block where just nothing came at all when the idea was given?
Probably on some occasions have been very good if I had, yes.
No, the idea of John Session having an improviser's block is rather... What, he didn't say anything for a couple of seconds. Yes, I remember once. Yeah, there was a second I can remember you not saying anything.
Really?
But you got over it after that.
The other thing that struck me watching Clive was incredibly erudite. It was. I mean, in that pilot, we have John doing T.S. Eliot, and quite early on we have Josie improvising Stephen Sondheim. Yes. And she gets a spontaneous round of applause from the audience for one of her parodies of Sondheim. We don't want to be too depressed about the way television has gone. I doubt you could get away with this kind of stuff now.
No, I think John in particular was very erudite, and one of the games we played, or they played, was just making up a story, but in the style of various authors, and I think that was sort of one of John's great sort of things. And erudite is one way of describing it. Some people said, this is a bit sort of show-offy, but, it was good to watch, but it was going to be followed by somebody then giving prop to play with, and something long and thin made to look like some part of the body. So
Because I was in all the episodes in the first series, and I felt rather awkward because we'd originally done it for the BBC, and of course it had been nicked by Channel 4 on the radio we did. Whereas Stephen Fry and I were the team captains, as it were. And then, of course, Stephen, who was never short of a job, was really oversubscribed, so he couldn't do it on the telly. So I felt like the person in the gym instructor who shows you how to use the Indian clubs or whatever.
And it's an interesting mystery that, and you're a lawyer, so you can present it in the way it happened. How did it end up on Channel 4 if it had been Radio 4 on the radio?
Oh, well, it was on Radio 4. Dan Patterson, we already mentioned, was an enthusiastic, wanted to take it further, and I can remember him discussing it with me, and he said, well, we must do it on television, who should we go to? And I volunteered the opinion, reasonably enough, well, it's a BBC radio programme, we should offer it to the BBC, and due course a tape was sent to the relevant person at the BBC. It was on his desk, and there it remained for a long while. Meantime, one of the people who came on the show was Jimmy Mulville, who was setting up Hat-Trick Productions and started doing things with Channel 4. Discussions started there, Channel 4 quite fairly early days, though they wanted to do it. And eventually we heard from the BBC say, well, possibly we could consider maybe trying out a pilot on the... It's a bit of a radio idea, but I can't see how it could work. Well, improvisation, visually, how could that work? Maybe we could do a pilot. And we had to say, well, it's very kind of you, but we've been commissioned to make a 13-part series on Channel 4. We'll start filming next week. Oh, wait a minute, isn't there something in the contract? No, there isn't anything in the contract. And I, in many ways, it would have been, should have been on the BBC, but Young and Hungry, Channel 4 snapped it up, and they were pretty good to us for
very
quite a
good
while.
to us. Very good.
But I find it very touching how young you all are on these tapes, because when American stars come over with their DVD box set from 20 years ago, they actually look older on the DVDs because of all the work they've had done, whereas it's rather touching the English how people look.
Well, I think the subtly disguised thing is how much we've aged in that time.
Well, no, everyone has. No, it's rather touching. It's like old photographs. It's like 20 years. Exactly.
I don't think Josie and Clive have changed a bit.
And it's on Dave. I mean, the next step has to be get a TV channel called Clive, hasn't it, really?
I'm not sure the name Clive has quite the most appeal as Dave. The whole notion of Dave is that everyone's got a mate called Dave. I'm not sure everyone's got a mate called Clive.
But you could have you and Mr. James, couldn't you, kind of alternating?
Now you're developing a good idea. The channel called Clive, it's only for people with no neck, no eyes, no hair, and that's...
No.
Oh, sorry.
There's a moment of not knowing what to say. So.
Yes.
You improvise about a TV channel called John, or Josie, I suppose.
We used to get that a lot in the olden days, people wanting us for voiceovers and saying when we got there wouldn't be a script. And, they'd say, just make it up as you go along.
What, they just give you the toilet cleaner and say just...
Yeah.
Well, the thing about the programme was that it was obviously actors improvise as a sort of exercise. People can write films by improvising characters. But to make it on radio and then television, you have to get the concept of improvisation. You want to get that moment of people being put on the spot. But... it has to be sort of tidied up and chopped up into short bursts, because otherwise it'd just get boring. That was the sort of structure of it, which I think put a lot of pressure on the performers, because you just had to come up with something good virtually immediately.
It's like QI or Have I Got News. I mean, you have your little window of opportunity, and you've got to come in with something good and then shut up, because... In the case of Have I Got News, it's basically a sort of slightly hidden soap opera between Ian and Paul, and more pronouncedly when Angus was there as well.
He was the character written out of the soap opera.
He was written out of the soap opera. He fell into the threshing machine. Yes.
But then the other thing we haven't mentioned is the musical improvisation, which was...
Yes, well, I mentioned the Sondheim, for example.
Oh, of course you did, but I think that was always fabulous. That was the thing that always impressed me most. And I think was the thing that sometimes made people doubt how genuine it was, because since Josie's here, and she did a lot of great songs, she'd set off a song, and Richard Branch would be following her, and they must have been rehearsing this for weeks.
Well, that's why I asked that question, because on the Sondheim one you do, which is you're given telephone and Stephen Sondheim,
right,
and you and the pianist, you go into this incredibly elaborate and precise Sondheim
Sometimes
parody.
I'd follow him or he'd follow me. Sometimes if I remember certain ones where we wouldn't follow each other quite so well, so it would be a little bit off key.
I remember doing Whose Line in New York, and Dan Patterson, our producer, was trying to get the American audience to stay back for pickups. Remember, they were all flooding out. They weren't going to do any of that.
And some of them were believing that the scores were real, weren't they? They're very competitive.
Yeah. We did it in the studios where they recorded Bilko, which for me was like going to church.
Now, and for us meant we had to listen to your impersonation of Bilko for hours on end.
Bilko meeting Al Pacino. No. Sorry, private joke.
Can we have that?
What, right now?
Bilko meeting Al Pacino, go on.
Okay. I never done movies about Fort Baxter. Maybe I will do it one day, but
Oh, look at you, Mr. Pacino, standing there. What is happening to you? Have you got Cuban heels on, haven't you?
He's an amazing guy, Bilko. I learned everything I did with Bob De Niro from... yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. That's quite enough of that. Enough of that, Ed.